We're about to hop on an IGTV with Erika, who specializes in shame and healing trauma. We're going to be talking about attachment styles and healing through shame when you're the other woman. So I'm just going to get our Erika on. Won't be a minute. And hi to the people on the YouTube channel. I've got two screens here, so I'm just working with both. There we go. Okay, we're just waiting for it to hop on. We had a few technical difficulties just before. We're on. Okay. Now, the technical difficulties were before were that we were having many voices in many places. But can you hear me, Erika?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, beautiful. So today we're going to be talking about shame when you're the other woman in an affair relationship and how to move through that shame if you're currently in the affair relationship or if you're out of the affair relationship but still have that shame from things that you've done in the past. If you're not in an affair relationship, then this is still really relevant because shame appears in so many different places. And the other thing that we're going to be talking about with Erika is attachment styles. So, Erika, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I am a trauma coach and anxiety coach, and I also am a writer and a speaker. And I study a lot about shame and relationships. That's like a core focus of my work right now. But a little bit just about my background is I have a bachelor's and a master's in psychology. I'm also a certified yoga teacher and certified personal trainer. So that was kind of the genesis of my journey, was combining knowledge of the body with psychology. So it's really like body mind work. And I predominantly work with women right now and just really unpacking trauma and understanding how it shows up in the body and using modalities such as somatic psychology and polyvagal theory, inner child work, and depth psychology. So that's kind of a little bit about my background and the work I do right now.
Beautiful, thank you. And right now, you're doing a lot with attachment styles. Can you tell us a bit about what is attachment styles and how we spot them in the relationships that we have?
Yeah, so attachment style is basically how we orient to other people and really how we orient to ourselves. And we can't really talk about attachment style without talking about the nervous system, right? They're totally intertwined. And the intersection of our nervous system and our survival states with our attachment styles is really what determines our behavior in relationships.
Yeah.
So would it be helpful to just kind of name the attachment styles to
Yeah,
start?
go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have four main attachment styles, one of them being secure. And that's, of course, where we all would like to land and kind of live in. And this just means we're able to show up authentically and present and feel safe within ourselves and within other people, or with other people. And then there's three attachment styles that fall under insecure attachment. And those three are anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And anxious attachment is really so much about the person who wants to be closer, who wants to connect more, who's always leaning in. You see a lot of codependency in this attachment style. And the root of it is really like anxiety and not being able to soothe the nervous system. So leaning into the other person for that. Whereas avoidant is kind of the opposite. They might still be feeling anxiety and overwhelm and all of that, but they move away from the other person. So they withdraw or they isolate. And then you look at disorganized, and it's kind of a fluctuation between the two, is the simplest way to describe that. But it also really involves our survival system. So someone in disorganized attachment is really just trying to survive because at the core, they don't feel safe in their body or in relationships.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. I have some questions. So, in regards to affairs, why a few questions might start with the first, which is why someone might feel like they keep attracting people that unavailable or in an affair relationship, like I'm attracted to married men or something like that. Not me personally, but like if someone's like, why am I constantly attracted to people that are married? Why might they be seeking safety in someone that is essentially unavailable?
Yeah, well, the most interesting part about this, when we talk about emotional unavailability and dating other people that are emotionally unavailable, what it's really reflecting to us is there are parts of us that are emotionally unavailable as well.
Mm.
So there are parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at, or that we're not connected to, or maybe we have shame or fear around. So anytime we see that showing up in another person, it's also because it's present within us.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. And the other question that I have is for the anxious attachment style, that it may be in an affair relationship and wanting to leave the affair relationship, but keeps holding on for so much longer than they feel comfortable in it. Why would Can you tell me more about the anxious attachment style and why they can't let go of something that is hurting them?
Yeah, the most simple answer to that is they feel like there's a safety that they have with this other person that they don't have with themselves. So that's where we really will accept crumbs or accept so little from another person because we feel like in this dynamic, at least having someone else there, we are safer, or this idea that we're safer than we would be if we were all by ourselves.
Mm.
Anxious attachment is it's a lot about navigating the abandonment wound. And so being alone is often where you're in that core wound and it's so uncomfortable and painful that you're willing to do anything to not be alone.
Mm. And so, with someone with that anxious attachment style, how can they move through it if they've been like, I've wanted this to change for so long. Why can't I let go? Why can't I move on? Why can't I change this? How can they start progressing in that direction?
Yeah, it really comes down to how can you feel safe in your body? How can you feel safe by yourself, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times to establish that safety within ourselves, we need to have someone else in our life that is someone we feel completely safe with, whether that be a professional or a close friend, a coach, a healer, however you want to title that person. But one core relationship where we feel so safe that we are able to take in what's called co regulation. I don't know if you're familiar with that term at all.
I'm not, no.
No. So basically, it means that if we're with another person and we both feel so safe, both parties are going to show up completely authentic. And when you're in like an authentic connection, it's really settling for the nervous system. And so
Mm.
your nervous system starts to soothe and calm down. So we first learn that soothing, calming experience from a relationship, from co regulation. And
Yeah.
then we're able to start doing that ourselves, which is then self regulation, self soothing. But a lot of times, or almost all the time, someone with anxious attachment didn't have co regulation as a child. So they were never shown how to soothe themselves. They may never have been soothed by their primary attachment figure, their parent. So we're
Yeah.
asking people with anxious attachment to soothe themselves when they've never had the experience of being soothed. So
Yeah.
it's something they have to relearn as an adult, which can be really uncomfortable and it's hard, but it's possible.
So you're saying you find another external person to help you through that experience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts with another person because co-regulation comes before self-regulation always.
Okay, so we'll go into more about that. I just, for the
Yeah.
people that are on, we're talking about attachment styles in affair relationships. So if you're in a relationship and you don't know how to navigate the pain, the guilt, the shame, everything that you're going through, then stay on. So, um, like a lot of the things like in inner child healing, we talk about reparenting ourselves, but with co-regulation, we're talking about like seeking that external person to help us co-regulate, to help us move through that situation. Is that correct?
That is it. Nailed it.
That is amazing. I love that realization because I'm like thinking now, and for people listening, I personally was the other woman in an affair relationship for years. And I was trying for so long to create change and I didn't know how to. And when I found someone that I could fully be safe with and tell my story and how like get help from them, then I had their support to help move through it. So I love that. Now we don't have too much longer on this live. I want to quickly connect on shame. How do we spot the signs of shame in our life?
So I would say the easiest way to spot it is when there's something we want to hide, when we want to shrink, when we want to be, well, not necessarily we want to be, but when we become silent around something, usually there's shame that's present. Um, Shame shows up in dynamics where we're in kind of a black and white type of thinking, or when we're really, really tied to this idea of being right. So, whenever you see this kind of dynamic of right or wrong, black or white, wanting to hide, being silent, you can guess that there's probably shame lurking around somewhere.
Beautiful. And when we start to notice that we have a lot of shame that we're carrying, how can we begin to acknowledge it and then move through that feeling?
Yeah, so underneath any emotion is a sensation. And this is kind of part of somatic psychology that we briefly touched on at the beginning. But getting in touch with that sensation below the emotion and staying with that sensation until it dissolves is part of the process. So if we were to unpack shame and bring it back to like that raw sensation in our body, usually it's a feeling of disgust.
Hmm.
And whenever there's like disgust in our system, um, think about it as like if you've had food poisoning and you like viscerally feel disgusted, right? And what you want to do is purge or get it out of your body. So the genesis of shame is this idea of disgust, and it really just wants to get out of your body. So that's kind of the beginning part of working with shame, is being able to identify when that sensation is in your body and how can you externalize it. So how can you reach out to that safe person again and share this thing that you're pressing down or hiding, and it's festering and getting so much bigger internally, right? But
Yeah,
it's naming the feeling, sitting in the feeling, and sharing it with someone you feel safe with and trust.
beautiful. Is there a particular part in the body that shame shows up most, or is it different for every person?
Yeah, I think it's different for every person, but I can say for me, my own experience of it and what I see a lot with the clients I work with is that it really shows up in your sacral area, or like your abdomen or lower stomach area.
Yeah,
And it is not a good feeling.
it
To
is.
put it lightly, it's not a great feeling. But that's where I see it show up the most.
Yeah,
What
beautiful.
about for you?
Yeah, I would be the same. And then I also get like a tightness up,
Yeah, yeah,
up
totally.
around not speaking.
Right, like in the throat chakra, it like
Yeah.
closes off. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love this conversation. I just have a few notes here and I want to make sure that like we've discussed things that I want to connect on. Oh yeah, so I want to quickly connect on the freeze response, and especially when we're like shame and the freeze response are so connected.
Mhm.
Often when we're stuck in a rut and we feel heaps of shame or trauma from something, we just numb.
Mhm.
How can we notice that we're actually numbing and we're in the freeze response so that we can begin to create change in our life?
Yeah, so maybe it's starting with kind of like what the freeze response is or what it looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah, please.
Um, so if we're talking about the freeze response, what we're actually talking about is a nervous system state. And the freeze response is like the most primal survival state. And it's also kind of our last resort for survival. And once we've gone into freeze, there's a pathway that gets built then from trigger to freeze that happens almost automatically. It becomes our default reaction. So it happens before we're even conscious to it. It's like our nervous system goes there involuntarily.
Yeah.
Um, And for people, freeze shows up as numbing, like you said. There's not a lot of sensation. You don't feel a lot. Your heart rate is a lot slower. There might be like a heaviness or this like lethargic feeling of it's just hard to move or do anything. A big response with freeze is dissociating. So there's like this split that happens between our mind and our body. Like our mind goes somewhere else, but our body is still in this present space. Um,
Can you tell us more about how that looks if the mind and body are separated?
yeah. Let me just kind of give you an example of it. So say you're in a conversation with someone and they say something that's really triggering or really uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
yet you don't know how to express that this makes me feel uncomfortable, or you don't know how to express a boundary and say no.
Yeah.
So instead, what you do, your body becomes really rigid and tense, and your mind starts to like zone out or go somewhere else. Because if
Mm.
our mind can escape the present moment, that's our quickest pathway to escaping what's happening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was actually going to ask you that more so about like before as well, which I forgot to ask. When we're moving through shame and you're saying to sit with the shame and acknowledge it, what if we don't want to go there? What if we're like, I don't even want to look, like, I don't want to feel it. I don't want to go there. I just want to avoid it. How do we like confront shame when we're like, no, I would rather go do something else, go think about something else, go block
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Well, that right there already, I think, is a step ahead because you're aware. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm in shame and I don't want to feel this right now. And I think that we can give more permission around that and let that be okay, because there's that moment of consciousness, right? You're making a conscious choice, as
Yeah.
opposed to other times if you're in shame and you're not even conscious to it. And then you go do these other things or other behaviors, to become even more unconscious and numb out. That's a totally different thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to that moment of awareness when you're like, I'm in shame. I don't want to feel this. Okay. I honor that part of me doesn't want to feel this. And can I lean in just 1%? Can
Yeah.
I feel it for 1 minute? Can I tell someone just a little bit of what's going on? Right. So instead of making it this big thing, breaking it down into little gradual pieces, I think is really helpful for starting to confront it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Do you need to be willing for it to allow it to be a little bit messy at first in order for it to get better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think at first, sometimes it's actually more of an intellectual process, right? And that kind of protects us because we're not in the feeling of it.
Yeah.
So we kind of start with gaining the knowledge about, like, okay, I understand what's going on here. I intellectually or logically get that, okay, shame's present. And sometimes that's the first step. And
Yeah.
then from there, we gradually start to deepen into it where it becomes like a body experience, because
Mm.
we can only feel and express our emotions if we're embodied.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you. I love this topic. If you have questions, I want to put them below, or you're watching the replay, then write them below or send Erika or myself a message. Erika, can you tell us more about how people can work with you?
Yeah, so follow my Instagram. It's at _ anxious female, or you can check out my website, which is anxiousfemale.com. And I think any of the information you would need is all on either of those sources.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I love doing this live with you. Do you have anything else that you want to share before we hop off?
No, I think I'm good. I'm glad we chatted about this. This stuff is it's like so important, and no one wants to talk about shame. No one.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable feeling.
I'm a little hot right now. It's fine.
Yeah, it is definitely an amazing topic to connect on, and so freeing when you release whatever it is that is holding you down because of that shame. Oh, it's so good. You feel so free. So I want to just quickly read and make sure I got through everything. We got through our technical difficulties, which is amazing. Yeah, that's fantastic. So we have Erika on. We're going to sign off now. Erika, I'll sign out of Instagram and then we can keep connecting. But thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, guys. I think my English just got disordered then. Bye. I'll just stop this recording.